What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here's my fantasy football advice for NFL Week 13. This fantasy football advice is for informational purposes only. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. Okay, in this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper and a stud for each position. And if you stay to the very end after all my picks and after I show you the Draft Dashboard tools, I'll give you my super secret sleeper pick that no one's talking about. Okay guys, at the quarterback position, I like Russell Wilson from the Seattle Seahawks playing the San Francisco 49ers, who have the 9th worst defense overall and give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Russell Wilson has scored 25, 19, and 27 fantasy points in his last 3 games, averaging 20 fantasy points per game on the season. He gets about 4 rushes a game, which is great news for fantasy quarterbacks. If he gets in the end zone, that boosts his fantasy points. And Russell Wilson is only $6,300 DraftKings salary. He's projected at 20 fantasy points here in Week 13. I love that it's a home game. That Seattle Seahawks home crowd is no joke. Russell Wilson has been under-owned, and I think he remains so this week with 30-point fantasy upside. I think he's a great tournament play. I like Russell Wilson versus the San Francisco 49ers. Okay, now for a lower salary quarterback. He's not really a sleeper. I'm not sure who's going to go under the radar. It's Kirk Cousins for the Minnesota Vikings playing the New England Patriots, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, but they give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins has scored 30, 19, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He averages 22.3 fantasy points per game on the season. He gets 3.1 rushes per game. He got 6 rushes last game. He's got the offensive weapons. He loves to throw the deep ball. I think this is a great matchup versus New England. And Kirk Cousins is only $5,500 DraftKings salary, projected at 19.7 fantasy points, so right around 20 fantasy points here in Week 13. I love the DraftKings price. He's $2,100 more on FanDuel. I think Kirk Cousins is worth a risk versus this New England defense that's not that great versus opposing quarterbacks. Real quick guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all our DFS tools for NFL, and the tools for NBA are awesome. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Okay guys, my Week 13 running back stud is Kareem Hunt for the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Oakland Raiders, who are the 4th worst defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Kareem Hunt has scored 20, 12, and 33 fantasy points in his last 3 games, averaging 21.5 fantasy points per game on the season. He gets 3.2 targets per game and 16.5 rushes per game. That puts him right about 20 touches per game. Kareem Hunt is only $7,800 DraftKings salary. He's $1,100 more on FanDuel. Just an absolute steal on DraftKings. Outside of that 12-point game that he had, Kareem Hunt has been solid. This is a great matchup for him. If Kansas City gets up big on Oakland, Kareem Hunt could be the guy to run the clock out. He's going to get plenty of work. I love Kareem Hunt here in Week 13. Okay, now for a low salary running back who got it done last week, so more people are going to be on him, but I still like this play. It's Gus Edwards from the Baltimore Ravens playing the Atlanta Falcons, who are the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Gus Edwards has scored 15, 23, and 1 fantasy point in the last 3 games. Remember, he just took over the lead duty a couple games ago, so throw out that 1. He's got 15 and 23 fantasy points in his last 2 games. He had 23 rush attempts last game, 17 the game before that. Gus Edwards is only $4,800 DraftKings salary. He is $1,600 more on FanDuel, so I don't like him as much over there. He's projected to get 10.9 fantasy points here in Week 13. I like Gus Edwards because of the fantastic matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. My bounce back stud of the week is DeAndre Hopkins for the Houston Texans playing the Cleveland Browns, who are the 5th worst defense overall and give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. DeAndre Hopkins has scored 12, 16, and 30 fantasy points in his last 3 games. averaging 21.2 fantasy points per game on the season in an average of 9.3 targets per game. He's only got 6 targets in the last 2 games, which is way under average. DeAndre Hopkins is $8,200 DraftKings salary. He's $600 more on FanDuel, projected at 18.5 fantasy points here in week 13. I like him as the bounce back candidate. He's had a couple of bum games, and now he's got a fantastic matchup versus a terrible Cleveland defense. I like DeAndre Hopkins versus the Cleveland Browns. Okay, now for a low salary wide receiver who may fly under the radar. I like Chris Godwin for the Tampa Bay Bucks playing the Carolina Panthers, who are the 8th worst defense overall and about middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Chris Godwin has scored 8, and 20 fantasy points in his last 3 games, averaging 11.8 fantasy points per game on the season in an average of 5.6 targets per game. Chris Godwin is only $3,900 DraftKings salary. He's $1,500 more on FanDuel. I love that DraftKings price. He's projected at 11.3 fantasy points here this week, and he's got 20-point upside on a team that loves to throw deep. If he catches a couple long bombs for touchdowns, he's going to crush value. So I like Chris Godwin here in week 13. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. I like Travis Kelce for the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Oakland Raiders. This is the clear stud tight end on the slate. The Raiders are the 4th worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Travis Kelce has scored 32, 11, and 29 fantasy points in the last 3 games, averaging 19.3 fantasy points per game on the season. He gets an average of 9.2 targets per game. He got 15 targets last game. Travis Kelce is $7,000 DraftKings salary, $800 more on FanDuel, projected at 18 fantasy points here in week 13. If you have the salary, spend up for Travis Kelce. He very rarely lets you down. And now for a lower salary value play here at tight end. I like Cameron Brate for the Tampa Bay Bucks playing the Carolina Panthers, who are the 8th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Cameron Brate has scored 12, 4, and 2 fantasy points in the last 3 games. But keep in mind, he just got the starting role due to an injury to O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard is still going to be out, and Cameron Brate's price hasn't come up that much. He got in the end zone last week, and Cameron Brate is only $3,700 DraftKings salary, $1,200 more on FanDuel, projected at 9.4 fantasy points here in week 13. I like Cameron Brate at home versus the Carolina Panthers. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. You've unlocked the bonus content. Okay, my super secret sleeper pick for week 13 is Bruce Ellington from the Detroit Lions playing the LA Rams, who have the 6th worst defense overall and give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Bruce Ellington has scored 9 and 11 fantasy points the last 2 games, averaging 8.7 fantasy points per game on the season. He got 7 and 9 targets the last 2 games. He's a starting wide receiver over there in Detroit. Bruce Ellington is only $3,500 DraftKings salary. He's $1,400 more on FanDuel, and he's projected to get 10.1 fantasy points. I love Bruce Ellington as a sleeper pick here in week 13. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for week 13. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.